Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Concept to Collectible Designer Toys as a Maker Education Framework. Thank you for joining. I'm excited that you all chose to be in this breakout room today. I'd like to introduce myself. I am Michelle Delgado. I am with Fab El Paso. And the lessons I'm showing today have been adopted from a week-long designer toy studio camp. But each camp, as you'll see, module, it translates as a standalone lesson. So let's jump into why designer toys. Um, it's not a very known art form, a very known topic, more so around the country, around the world, but in our city personally, it's not that well known. But this framework grew out of my own work as a designer toy artist. So for the past 10 years, I've been a part of a designer toy artist community. So I'm one half of a art toy team called Ghost Fox Toys. So my role is co-designer, co-owner, and I'm also one of the painters. So what we do is we customize blank toys. So we paint, we do sculptures out of blank platforms that already exist. We work with resin, we do molding, casting, hands-on sculpture, we do 3D printing. We do a lot of different things. We've even done some production toys. So working with like a production manufacturer, picking out colors, digital samples, things like that. So coming to Fab Lab, I really wanted to share something that I was passionate about, something that I had a lot of knowledge about, and I wanted to see how these different toy making processes could translate into an educational setting. In practice, it became a flexible way to support both creative expression and then also a way to build technical skills. Okay, so also before we move on, let's define designer toys. So designer toys are collectible art objects. They they're created by independent artists or small studios, and they're produced in limited runs. Okay, they emphasize original artistic expression over mass market appeal. So you're usually going to get smaller runs, maybe even a small thousands, as opposed to like a Mattel who might make something that's like hundreds of thousands of pieces. Okay. Some are purely for display, and others may have interactive components. They can be made from a lot of materials, so vinyl, resin, and even wood. Okay, so takeaways, they're small collectibles, small art pieces. And the real thing is you know who the artist that made them. It's not like a toy sculpted by some random, very talented sculptor. It's an artist that puts their name and their personality behind the piece. So our program context was our title was Designer Toy Studio, and the setting was Fab Lab El Paso, and we are located in the La Nube Steam Discovery Center in El Paso, Texas. And the camp was 1 week long, and it was about 4 hours a day. Now, the age group that we catered to here was middle school and high school students. And the main idea, the big framework is think of it as a framework and not just a project, right? We want something repeatable that goes from your imagination, your concept, to an actual physical object. And then we're going to have some kind of audience that we share this with. Okay. The concept to collectible pipeline. We're going to go through each of these areas to show how we got from the beginning to the end. So the first one up is concept art. It's the on-ramp, okay? This is where everybody starts. We use many different methods to plan out ideas. We can use paper and pencil, modeling clay, or even an iPad. Okay, so what we do is we have students think about not only the physical look of their character, but also the colors, the vibes, personality, backstory, stuff like that. Really, we really want them to make it their own. So this particular activity, the first activity It's has a very easy entry, right? So it's not intimidating, but it's encouraging and it motivates the students to want to keep doing more and learning more. Okay, so like I said, it's easy to start. It takes minimal skills, tools, or prior knowledge. There's a little fear of doing something wrong, and it's accessible to a wide ranges of ages and abilities. So when we did this in a camp, we did have a small age variety, and we had a abilities variety as well. And then later on, I'll talk about how we scaled this camp to integrate younger students. And there was no complications. It ran just like it did with the older students. Okay. When they create a concept idea first, as opposed to just jumping into creating their actual physical item, they feel more of a sense of ownership. They're motivated to continue maybe beyond the class, and then the work becomes more meaningful to them, right? So then we move to phase two, which is our digital translation. So we're going from concept to our digital form. So phase two is where the students took the idea and began translating it. This happens in two steps. So we're moving from the sketch of the 2D image, and then we're going to go to 3D. Okay, so phase 2.1, that's our 2D digital drawing. So we might have started off with like a paper and pen sketch, and then we ended up switching to the iPads and to form a digital image. So the students began refining their concept. They started to really make intentional choices. Maybe change playing with color, playing with the expression, or are you going to have accessories? So this helps them to clarify their idea before actually building and getting into decisions. And before they even have to like do their think about material constraints. Okay. So the day one, students got their iPad. What they did was they were all provided a blank figure. So I have one here. This is one of the blank figures. What they did was they took a picture of their toy blank. So you see, it's just like very simple shapes. There's no like indicators of what this should be, but it leaves the possibilities open for what it could be. Okay. So they take a picture of this blank, and then they start to draw on top of it. So the program we use is called Procreate. It's on the iPad. It's not a free program, but it's one of those programs that you buy once. It's like around $15. And if your classroom shares a cloud, it can upload to all the devices, right? Okay. So they took their picture, they're sketching, and then we're telling them to think about this in an additive way, right? You got your blank. Now, what are you adding to it? Does it have a face, accessories, props? Okay. And starting from the blank base is really helpful because it removes the whole thing of, well, where do I begin, right? Oftentimes, as creators, inspiration doesn't always come right away. So this takes away from that. They'll have a mini spark of inspiration with these abstract shapes, and then they can begin. Okay. Um, the reason I use Procreate is because oh, sorry. You can hear my cat sneezing. Sorry about that. We use Procreate because it's highly intuitive and easy for students to pick up quickly, even if they don't have any digital drawing experience. Okay. If they can hold a paper and pencil, then they can hold the digital pen. And then with a quick, like 15-20 minute overview, they're up and sketching in no time. Okay. This also gives them a satisfying way to see their ideas start to come to life. Okay, phase 2.1, we're going to get into the 3D modeling aspect now. Okay, students use their 2D drawing as a guide to create their 3D form. We created using Tinkercad in our class. It's usually the go-to CAD for the students, especially when most students didn't have prior CAD experience. A couple did, but most didn't. So we use Tinkercad. We start with a short lesson on the basics, right? Out of 4 hours, we take maybe like 20 or so minutes to go through Tinkercad and and then they're up and running. Okay. So, like with the Procreate model, they do get this one of these blanks uploaded into the classroom lesson. Now, the one they get, it's even more simplified. So, take away these things on top, and they're just left with the sphere and this kind of like cone body. So, it's even more of a blank slate for them. Okay. We tell them think about adding features. It's a little easier. They're not starting from scratch. And then we start to integrate them thinking about volume, scale, how things are attached, right? We give them a little bit of direction as far as that. And then we get into when it's time to print, okay, what is going to work and what's not going to work, right? And then we help them adjust that in their designs. So they learn that not everything that looks great in 2D is going to translate to 3D. So that's a really good lesson that they get going starting from 2D into the 3D. Okay. In a separate lesson, the students use the skills they acquired doing this. On the blank model, they ended up doing an original 3D model. So as you see in the slide here, the first one was a student's character built on top of the blank. And then the second one you see, it's for another lesson of this camp. They created a fully 100% original character from scratch. So this was a student did not have prior knowledge of Tinkercad, but they did have this first day lesson in Tinkercad. And then by the time we got to this lesson, they were able to fully make their own original character. Okay. And if you're doing this in your classroom, it could be adjusted. You can use other programs besides Tinkercad. And you can also use iPads or laptops, right? Depending on what you have or what you think works best. All right. Phase three, physical production. So phase three is a very powerful moment for students. It's after all this like 2D, 3D ideas, concepts, right? This is where their ideas become reality. So we do keep speaking on the materials. We 3D print them. We point out if anything goes wrong, any mistakes, and we show them why, and let's fix this together. So the things instructors might want to highlight when it gets to the physical production part is you want to talk about decision making, problem solving, and then material literacy, right? All that stuff is needed to have a good outcome with your final product. So when the students see their work and their ideas pay off, they're like it says, it shows on the screen, my digital thing became real. That's a very powerful and exciting moment. So in this case, as you can see, our students had the next slide. So by the end of the program, the students left with multiple physical things, right? They left with their hand-painted blank figure. They left with a 3D print of their design that they did on the blank. They left with a fully original design of their 3D print. And then they also left with we did another lesson that's not going to be featured so much here. We did some molding and casting. So they left with a plaster cloud that they hand painted. Okay. That they not only hand painted, but they molded and casted themselves. So, physical fabrication naturally opens the door to post-processing. So we also talked about that, right? It reinforces making also includes beyond just the initial build. Okay. So let's go on. And then phase four was branding and packaging. So we're introduced design thinking plus awareness. So students are going to see themselves not only as creators, but also as learners. Okay. When the students make this object and they go the next step to packaging, they're just not thinking about, oh, how I made this one thing, right? They're thinking beyond that. They're thinking now we're bringing in the storytelling, we're bringing in identity. We taught them about brand. Maybe you have a special artist name. So a big thing was with almost everything they created, they also had packaging that tied with that. Okay. And then the last phase was audience and reflection. So public facing work, it's a real big motivation, right? When students know their stuff is going to be seen, not just by their instructors, but by like people from the outside. So their peers, their family, the public, right? So a part of designer toys, the designer toy world, is either selling your stuff in person or gallery shows. So we had like a real mini gallery show for them at the last day where they had all their stuff displayed. They had their parents, family members, siblings come in, staff around the museum came in. They got to look at everyone's work. And this is really good because it goes beyond, okay, you did this thing, now write a paragraph, right? Reflect on what you did. So instead, they actually get to talk one-on-one. They get to answer questions maybe they didn't even think about before, right? And they get to go around and walk and see what their peers made. Really quick before we get into our small activity, I'm going to go over one of the big projects we did in this camp. So what we did and what we ended up with is a mini blind box series. And we chose this because blind box is probably the most popular aspect of the designer toy world, right? It's very known, very popular right now around the country. So they were tasked with working in teams. So everything else was individual, but at this point they're working in teams, teams of two, and they had to create an original character based on a concept of STEAM, right? So at the end, we ended up with two original characters from each. So we had two science, two engineering, and so on and so on. Okay, so they had to decide who was going to take the lead on 2D, who was going to take the lead on 3D. Now, they all had experience on 2D and 3D up to this point, but they divided how they saw fit. They got this little design concept paper. They did their sketch. They worked on the character name, personality, right? What's it about? So we go concept. Then we hopped into the 2D and 3D. So again, we're taking past lessons, integrating it here. One student refines their sketch and goes into Procreate, creates a really cute 2D image that's going to be used on packaging. And then the other team member models the 3D figure. We take it on step 4, because we're actually producing the thing. So we 3D printed all of their figures. So everyone got a figure that they made, they were the team of. They got one. So we did it like we had over 20 students, so everyone got what they created. And then we stepped on to packaging. So packaging, this could be a whole day, a whole camp on its own, but we made it part of this 2-day activity within our camp. So together, we got together as a class. We all threw in names. The students were like, I want to name this, I want to name that. We took votes, we whittled it down, and finally we ended up with Nerdy Lab creatures. We had a student design the look of the graphics that were going to go around the box, and then we took all the 2D art and put it around the box. Okay, so we designed, printed, cut, assembled. Okay, and the final product looked something like this. So the class essentially in 2 days created their own STEAM blind box series. Now, the fun thing about a blind box is when you buy them, you usually don't know what's in them, right? You look at the box and you're like, ooh, I hope that I get math. I like this little guy right here. You don't know what you get. So what happened with the class is everyone got a 3D print of what they created just so they can have it to, take it home with them. And then we printed a bunch of the characters that everybody made in different filament colors. Some were like gold, some were like fun rainbow filaments. We packaged them and blind. And then the day of the gallery show, every student got a box blind. So they didn't know what they were getting. So at the same time, we all opened them. And then here's one this is from the picture. This is the smart cookie. So this is a cookie calculator for the math section that they made. So the students were excited. They didn't know what they were going to get. Some people got their own in a different color. Some got things from another person and they got to show them, oh, I got your design. So it's really cool, really interactive. Now, this is the time for the interactive activity part. We're going to go over the iPad Procreate sketching thing. So if you have an iPad, if you have Procreate, you could follow along. I do have, I believe I have a Google Docs link that I'm going to put in the chat. Let's see. How do, trying to figure out how I get to the chat. Okay. So in case anyone wants to follow along, I just added the Google Docs link and it should have the image that we're going to be working on. So let me go over this real quick and then I'll start sharing my other screen. Okay, so this was what we did as part of our day one. It's all about toy customizing. So this is the process of where I said we take a blank, an already existing figure, and then we're gonna create something new with it. So we selected our platform, we're gonna sketch and then customize. These are the 4 blank images that they ultimately ended up customizing. So they're all slightly different. They were all built on the same base within Tinkercad. Again, they took the picture of the blank. They started to think about character details. What do you want it to look like, to say, to be called, the colors, right? And then they begin to sketch. So let me come over here and share my other screen. All right. Can you all see that mini iPad there? Is that showing?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. So this is Procreate. If you've not seen Procreate before, it's a pretty, intuitive drawing thing. I already have the image preloaded, right? But it has a built-in way where you can take pictures live in the moment. So if you see something, a shape, something cool, you could snap a picture and you could draw right on that picture. Here I uploaded the image. So what we went over with them is the basics of our pens, our eraser, how to zoom in, how to zoom out, okay? And what we did was we had them, we taught them about layers, right? You always want to have like a new layer in case there's any mistakes, it's easier to go back. So basically what they did is you're just gonna go in, you're gonna start by tracing the form. Now we could give them a preloaded, if you're strapped for time, you could just give them the pre-traced outline, right? But this is also part of the process. You want them to see the lines, the shapes, and maybe they get inspired when they're tracing, right? So you continue that. For time, I have one already, right? And then we're going to start to fill in. So again, after giving them a mini lesson in Procreate, you can explain to them how we drop in color, right? So then this is where the design starts to come to life. So I'm just gonna fill this in. And then got a color wheel, right? Okay. Now I just have a green thing, right? When some students customize this, they use the round things on top as eyes, some as hair poofs. It all depends, right? So I see this, kind of like an eye. So then I'm gonna come in here, right? And I'm just gonna fill that in there. I will duplicate, right? And so on and so forth. I think you all can kind of see what I'm going for as far as my character. And then if I had more time, of course, we can come in here and just keep adding as much detail as we want, right? Okay, and then I know, just keep it very simple, right? Put them out. So this is what every student did. And another reason why we used Procreate, it's a very cool option. You have to make sure you have this turned on the iPads, okay? There is a way where if you see right here, it captures the time-lapse recording. So once I know it was recording, I can go back and it's going to show all the little changes, right? That was the original, and it goes way back, all the way till I first started marking on this document, okay? With that, that becomes another element of something they could keep. You can export it, you can edit it. If you introduce Canva into your class, you could be like, okay, as part of our final presentation, we're going to take our video, we could edit out maybe the beginning or shorten it, and then you'll have another little extra element of them to show off their work. Okay, so right here would be where you would export your video. Okay, go back to sharing my other screen. And then I do think we'll have time for questions, whether it's for the course or with Procreate. So, okay. So, this was like a fast version to explain this week-long camp. But let's go over some key takeaways in case this is something you want to try integrating into your class, a workshop, a week-long camp, right? You don't necessarily need a background like mine in toys to present this to students, okay? So first of all, which is another reason why I really picked this as a camp idea, is designer toys as a STEAM framework. Okay, we touched on every element of STEAM. So from with science, we really got into materials, how they behave. When we did our molding and casting, we had them work with alginate and plaster. So we really talked about how these materials work, what kind of chemical reaction happens, curing times, things like that, okay? And then we get into technology. That's a really big one because we are in a makerspace, right? One second. Okay. So we worked with the 3D printers, right? We had simple tools. We used our most advanced machine we had, but then we also had them do simpler uses of technology. We got into engineering. So we talked about structure, problem solving within their design. With art, we got into character, right? There was a lot in art. There was character design, there was storytelling, etc., right? And then finally, math. So again, we talked about scale, we talked about proportion, and other aspects, especially when we did ratios, when we were doing the molding and casting. So these are just like a few things that we covered when it comes to STEAM. But of course, as you've seen the different lessons, there's a lot more that can be taught with that. Okay. Another key takeaway is how well the makerspace shined during these lessons, okay? Rather than centering on a single machine, this approach leverages the makerspace as a whole system. So we're giving students exposure to many different tools, right? Different tools, different materials, and workflows, how you go from one tool to another. We use both low tech stuff and then we use advanced fabrication. So what we used was we utilized the FDM printer. We did molding casting with the alginate and plaster. We did a lot of hand cutting with the boxes, the header cards. But those things could be altered in the future, right? We could scale up for older students, or maybe we had a 2-week camp, right? We could switch to, instead of hand cutting, we could do laser cutting. We can do the vinyl cutter. We could switch to some SLA printing, right? Instead of just the FDM. We could teach them the more advanced techniques with the resin printer. We also have a vacuum form that we wanted to utilize, but for time we didn't get to have that extra day. We wanted to make toys that were like in a header card. So they would design their header card, they would have their figure, and then we would use the vacuum form to form the plastic, right? We didn't get there, but in the future, that could be like a 1 day thing, or that could be designer toy part two camp. Okay. Another big thing is we always try to do at Fab Lab is show the real world relevance, right? And the career pathways. So the skills that they learned and picked up, they can translate directly into real world fields, right? They can go use it to go into creative fields, technical fields like product design, illustration, animation, maybe toys, right? Manufacturing, game design, digital fabrication, and so on, right? These skills really do give them that pipeline to go forward in their career pathways. And that also bleeds into entrepreneurship. Okay, so this is kind of like built in throughout the whole thing. Because the thing with designer toys is it can be appreciated as a fully just an art form, right? There's lots of gallery shows all around the country, around the world. But this is stuff that people make to sell, right? It's either e-commerce or in person. So we also integrated a lot of discussion of branding, pricing, presentation. So the students start to see themselves as makers with value, right? We did a lesson on like how do you price things, right? That's like the hardest thing as artists. How do we price stuff, right? How do we know what it's worth, right? It's worth what people will pay. Um, but there are some formulas out there you can kind of use to figure out part of it, right? A good rule of thumb is materials times 2.5, right? So we went over that with them. We talked about what would pricing materials be. But then we also taught them your time. Your time is precious, your time is valuable. How do you value yourself? Integrate that in there, right? So with that, they might get a spark of entrepreneurship, like, oh, I can make a thing and add my value, add my vision to it, and then actually sell it. Okay. So it's not just completing an assignment, but they are really getting this entrepreneurship value out of this as well. Okay, and finally, this course, it's modular and scalable. So this was a 1 week designer toy studio camp that we did. But each day can function as a standalone module. Okay, and then it could scale depending on age groups, time frames, location, and it could be implemented as group activities or individual activities. So we did this in the summer of 2025, and in October, was it October? No, in December we had 1 day camps of past camps. So we had a 1 day designer toy camp, and we did the lesson I just showed you where they sketched on Procreate and then they hand painted their figure, and we did a couple other things. And this was all condensed to 1 day, right? So we took a week long, we took a part of it, made it 1 day, and then we also had younger students. So yes, we had the middle high school students in this 1 day camp, but then we also had some younger kids, right? I think our youngest student was like a third or fourth grader, and they worked seamlessly together, right? We didn't have any group projects, but we did have all singular projects, and the elementary kids worked very well alongside the middle school and high schoolers. So depending on who you have, this can definitely be scalable. All right, so let's wrap it up with our conclusion. And I think I'm gonna have to give me 1 second because this guy is trying to be in the presentation. Okay. So, in conclusion, designer toys provide a flexible, engaging framework that turns process of making into a full circle educational experience, right? Beginning to end. We're helping students, I like to not joke, but I like to say, like when I came onto the Fab Lab team, my background as an artist, I bring the A, right? The A in STEAM, but this camp is a lot more than just art, right? but we are connecting imagination with tangible outcomes. We're letting students see their ideas come to life in both digital and physical form, right? They create a thing and then they get to bring a thing home and show it off. Okay, the easy integration of STEAM skills fosters problem solving, introduces real world skills like iteration, presentation, and entrepreneurship. And I am very happy to be an open book if anyone ever wants to reach out for more ideas on this camp, more in-depth stuff that we did. I'm always here. Feel free to use any of the ideas, make them your own, and integrate them. And that is all. So again, I am Michelle Delgado. I want to thank you all for being here for my presentation. I am with Fab El Paso, located in the La Nube STEAM Discovery Center. We have our socials and our website online. And then I'm also repping myself as an artist, right? So my toy design team with my husband, we are Ghost Fox Toys. And if you'd like to follow us and see the work I do outside of being a STEAM instructor at Fab Lab, I have my socials there as well, our Instagram and our website. And that is all. If anyone has any questions in these last few minutes, I am very happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We got about 5 minutes left. If anyone has questions, feel free to unmute yourself or jump in. There are a few questions in the chat that I can start off with. There was I think you went into how the packaging was designed, but what equipment did you use to produce that packaging?
Okay, so the packaging, what we used was I found a template online. There are lots of websites with lots of free templates. I just searched free box template. I gathered all their drawings from Procreate, and I believe I used, what's it called? Photoshop to kind of put all the images together. And then we don't have a this printer at work, but at home I have an Epson 8550 and it is a larger printer. I believe I printed these boxes on a 13 by 19 sheet of like smooth cardstock. And then we basically just cut them out by hand. Um, let's see. Is my screen still sharing?
Yep.
Okay, I can go back to show the thing really quick. Right here. So as you see here, yeah, this is how it was all formatted. And it was printed out on a big sheet, and then we just all sat down and we started cutting and assembling. Now this could have been probably saved time doing it on the laser cutter, right? After printing it, you would do alignment and cut it that way. So it takes a little more time up front, but then it'd be quicker cutting. We did print a lot of boxes. I think we ended up with like 26 that we did. But for the time we had, this is the way that we did it. But I would definitely next time integrate using the laser cutter for this part. Okay. And then any other questions?
I'm curious, just from a logistics standpoint, you said you had 20 students for this camp, and that seems like
Mhm.
a lot of things to get like 3D printed or printed outside of the hours of the camp. So like how much staff time once the campers left was required to keep all the logistics for this program running?
Yeah, totally. So what we did was we weren't not able to like start the process while they were there, right? So when they leave at 2, yeah, when they leave at 2, we're usually there. There's 3 instructors. We're usually there for about 3 more hours till the end of the day, right? So we are there prepping, getting their files together, making sure there's nothing like floating, right? So we're really getting in there one by one and going through them. And then we're just loading the plates. We have 4 3D printers that we had going. We had 2 bamboo carbons, and then we had 2 Crealities, and we just loaded them and print them overnight. Luckily, this is a 5-day camp, right? So the ones that were finished by the next day, the students got to see them. Oh, they were really excited. And anything failed, then we loaded up another plate to send it off again. So it was a couple days, but they weren't actually going to get these pieces till the last day. So there's still a buffer of like 2 days of printing, a day in between, and then the last days when they were really gonna start assembling. But you do need to have that extra time. If it's a 1 day camp, like what we did, we printed their pieces and then we got their information and told them from this day on, just come by and you could pick up your 3D print later on.
Awesome, thanks. There was a question in the chat of what you talked about casting with plaster and algae. What were you casting?
So we just had a little cloud design, a little flat cloud design to teach them how to do a flat mold. We use those materials for safety reasons, but if we do this again or an advanced version, we'll get the proper safety gear because we really want to show them the process of working with silicone and resin. Now, not only are those a little more tricky, you got to be more safe working with those, it's also more cost, right? So we use alginate and plaster to kind of simulate the use of resin and silicone. But that is why. And then they just ended up with a little flat 3D cloud, and then they painted that, and they created a header card. So we bagged it in a clear bag, and they had a little header card that they designed the art on. Yeah.
Awesome. We've got about 10 seconds left, so thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you everybody for coming.